Hello, welcome back. It is time for 5 questions, and this time we are going to talk about a team that I am very, somehow weirdly interested in than a lot of other teams in the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks. And I had a hot take in one of my Eastern Conference tier list videos. I think the Hawks are going to finish with the 8th seed this year. For some reason, I just find the Hawks roster fascinating in wake of the Dejounte Murray trade after that experiment clearly didn't work out. So what makes this team so fascinating to me? What things about this team I am excited about, curious about, have some, concerns about? Well, that's why we have the 5 questions. Same thing as last time, 5 themed questions, and within those themes, I'm going to ask a question specific to that theme. Let's not waste any time. Let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks. First question I have is a small picture question, as opposed to a big picture question where that requires taking a long view of the room, to quote Sam Hinkie. This is a small picture question just in relation to this upcoming season and maybe possibly next season. But simply, did the Hawks stumble into an identity? The Dejounte Murray experiment did not work out for 2 seasons. Trae Young and Dejounte Murray clearly were having a back and forth of, needing the ball in their hands more, while the other tried to play off ball and tried to adjust to that. And there were times where it was electric, but a lot of times it was just a clunky fit. Now that that's resolved, they clearly thought the experiment failed. They trade Murray to the New Orleans Pelicans, and they get Larry Nance Jr., EJ Liddell, who I really don't think is going to play much, or EJ Liddell, and I don't think he's going to play very much, and Dyson Daniels, who is a very good 6'8 defender. But now you look at the Hawks roster, and it is full of dudes that are at least 6'5 and above. Definitely a lot of dudes that are 6'8 and above, 6'7 and above, and surrounded by Trae Young and the rising emergence of Jalen Johnson. The Hawks might have stumbled into something here where they have a clear, excellent offensive engine in Trae Young, somebody that has scoring ability from deep range, that floater, and of course he grifts for fouls, and he's an incredible passer, and he is just an elite offense unto himself. But obviously he has defensive shortcomings, and even though he improved last year, he was still a negative defender. And if you're looking at this Hawks roster, this would be the direction you'd go into if you were trying to build a defensive identity around Trae Young. You surround him with a bunch of rangy 6'8 to 6'10 athletes that could shoot, run the floor, jump out the building, etc. And I just feel like the Hawks have somehow stumbled into that, because when you look at their top 9 in the rotation now, you have DeAndre Hunter, who we'll talk about later. Onyeka Okongwu, Bogdan Bogdanovic is 6'5". Larry Nance Jr. has always been a really good backup small ball 5 option. Jalen Johnson, of course, Dyson Daniels, like I mentioned. Their first overall pick, Zachary Richache, is in the mold of a 6'10 smooth player with handles. The Hawks have a lot of those guys now, a lot of those tall wings that can do a lot of things on the court. And now that the pecking order has more clarity and Trae Young is clearly the head guy of the show now with Jalen Johnson as an emerging sidekick, I feel like the Hawks might have stumbled into something here simply by trading away Dejounte Murray. And that talent play, while it did fail, it did sort of readjust things and realign things in the roster. And the talk about the roster leads me into my next question, the basketball question. Will the Hawks be a top 20 defense this year? During the Trae Young era, since he was drafted in 2018, the Hawks have finished in the top 20 in defensive rating per cleaning the glass one time. You'll see the defensive rating for the Hawks since 2018 up on the screen here, but it's been bad. And there are a number of reasons for that. One, your best player is just always going to be a negative defender, even though he made improvements on that side of the ball last year. I have to point that out before Hawks fans jump at my throat. Still a negative defender. And during the Trae Young era, there was a lot of players in the rotation that were just easy targets, whether it be Kevin Huerter, Bogdan Bogdanovic. I'll talk about DeAndre Hunter later, but I feel like DeAndre Hunter has more or less stayed the same defensively, maybe been a little bit worse since the second year. Dejounte Murray also clearly wasn't the defender that he was in San Antonio or as good as advertised. Old vets in the rotation, like in the past, they've had Danilo Gallinari, Wesley Matthews last year, Saddiq Bey last year. That's another fool's gold 3-and-D player right there. There are just a lot of reasons why the Hawks have never been at least an average defense in the Trae Young era. But I do think, as I mentioned, this roster gives them the pathway, to me at least, to have, or at least try to have, a top 20 defense when you have all these rangy wings. I feel like the Hawks have enough to insulate Trae Young, first of all, but also just switch a lot of things. And I think that bodes well to at least have a defense that isn't one of the worst in the league. The Hawks have some range, they have athleticism, they have rim protection, or guys who are good at protecting the rim in Okongwu and Capella. Can Ricochet provide something as a 6'10 smooth wing? He's a rookie, you can't expect much, but if he's not a turnstile on that end of the floor, that's a successful development for the Hawks. I don't know. Maybe I am too bullish on how the roster's been realigned after the Dejounte Murray trade, but I feel like the Hawks have enough players in the rotation now where they can, 1, insulate Trae Young, 2, have an identity, like switching all over the place. That's what I would do, at least if I had all those wings. And I feel like a path to a top 20 defense. I don't think they're going to be in the high end of that ranking. I think they'd be more in the back end towards the late teens, but that would still be a success in of itself. And the talk about the defense in the last question leads me into the third question. Can Onyeka Okongwu finally start? I think it's high time that he starts. I think he should have been the starting center for a while now over Clint Capella. And I think Okongwu starting is one of the ways the Hawks can at least have a pathway to get to a top 20 defense. The numbers didn't bear it out last season, but if you do the previous 2 seasons, the Hawks net rating with Capella off the court and Onyeka Okongwu on the court have been good. And with Onyeka, I think this will benefit the Hawks on both sides of the floor. Real quick, offensively, I just think Onyeka is a better offensive player than Clint Capella. He is very clearly limited with, running pick and rolls with Trae Young, and aside from that, that's all you're going to get with Okongwu. And you could see it with Quinn Snyder when he took over midway through the 2022-23 season or late that season, using Onyeka in dribble handoffs. He's more agile. Also, better chance Onyeka Okongwu will make a jump shot than Clint Capella. And I know he's been working on that jump shot. He's been taking the occasional 3 now, and I just think it's time to see what you have in this guy. You gave him a 4-year, $61 million contract, which I think is a fucking steal. And I would just try to get as much value out of that as possible developing him. And on the defensive end, you can use him in more ways than you can with Capella, where Capella is mostly a drop back big. You can't really hedge with him now, especially at his age. He's moving a tad bit slower. He can still protect the rim, but Onyeka can switch, he can hedge, he can protect the rim on the weak side. I don't know, I just feel like this is the time now for Okongwu to start and, find what you could get on the trade market for Capella, because this is a young player the Hawks should be developing. Whenever Onyeka played with Jalen Johnson and Trae Young, actually the Hawks' most used lineup with Onyeka at center last year was with Jalen Johnson at the 4, Saddiq Bey at the 3, Bogdan Bogdanovic at the 2, and Trae Young. Clearly, they're going to have to find a way to replace Saddiq Bey, which I don't think will be difficult. But my point is, if you're playing Onyeka, it's one of those things where his skill set gets accentuated by the talent around him, and in turn, that helps out and lifts up the team. And I feel like with Okongwu, it's high time that Quinn Snyder starts this guy. The next question I have is just purely a fun question. How fast will the Trae Young-Jalen Johnson duo take off? I am very high on this 2-man duo as opposed to the Trae Young-Dejounte Murray duo, and I'll explain why in just a second. But I don't think a lot of people realize, except for the hardcore NBA fan and the League Pass watchers, but I don't think the average fan knew just how much Jalen Johnson improved from his second year to his third year. One, just the massive difference in points per game, rebounding, playmaking, efficiency, improving as a 3-point shooter, just the improvement and the work ethic that takes to improve that much. It was almost like a Tyrese Maxey leap from his rookie year to his second year, where he just exploded and boom, all of a sudden he's averaging over 16 points a game, right? And Jalen Johnson, 6'9", uber athletic. I mean, top percentile athleticism, handle, can shoot, perfect partner for Trae Young. And here's a little something on the data with Trae Young and Jalen Johnson. Last year, in two-man lineups with Jalen Johnson and Trae Young in it, minus 3.7 net rating. That doesn't make sense. Why am I going to bloviate about the Jalen Johnson-Trae Young duo when in practice last year, they were getting outscored by teams on the per 100 possession basis? Funny thing is, if you take Dejounte Murray off the court and have just Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, the Hawks have a plus 3.7 net rating. The offense was really good. The defense, they were holding above water. You know, they weren't drowning out there. But I just think a Trae Young, Jalen Johnson duo is more useful in more ways than a Trae Young, Dejounte Murray duo, where they have to share the backcourt, the same spots on the floor, and then one of them ends up having to do something they're not comfortable doing, which is play off the ball, try to be useful in other ways. When you have Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, that's a natural fit to put next to a point guard, someone that can screen and roll, lob threat. Jalen Johnson can grab the rebound and go in transition, and that, gives Trae Young more organic chances to play off the ball where he can locate to the three-point line in transition. There's just a lot more ways where that partnership will benefit both parties in a lot of natural ways, as opposed to trying to make it work with the Dejounte Murray, Trae Young backcourt, right? You get the natural point guard big connection right there, and Jalen Johnson is versatile in a lot of ways that could help out Trae Young. I don't know. I just think this duo is really going to take off because Trae Young is one of the best lob passers in the game, one of the best passers, period. And with how much he stretches out a defense, and when you got Jalen Johnson, if you put him in a 4-on-3 situation with the improved playmaking that he showed last year, I'm just saying I can't wait to see year 2 of this because I think this is going to be fun. It gives the Hawks an identity offensively, and they can build off of that because it's a more natural pairing fit between two really good players, and I think the synergy will be there faster than you think. And my final question is more of a spotlight question. What are we going to get from DeAndre Hunter? I think his second year, he was on the trajectory at least to be a really good defender, and I don't think he's gotten worse, but I also don't think he's gotten better since that second year. The three-point volume keeps going up, which is great, especially under Quinn Snyder, and he did shoot 38.5% last year on 5 attempts, which was a career high. So that is very good. He also had like a 20-game stretch off the bench where he was averaging like 16 points and shot 40% from 3. But I wonder going into this year, is this going to be the year that Hunter puts it completely all together? He's definitely shown flashes, but I want him to elevate from theoretical 3-and-D player to combining both sides now. I just wonder if this is the year he puts it all together, because if you have a 3-and-D player, that is actually the perfect kind of player to put in this starting lineup with Trae Young, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu. But will he not like having the ball as much? Because coming off the bench, he had like a 22% usage rate, which was more than what he had when he was a starter. But I just wonder what type of year we're going to get from DeAndre Hunter. Not saying he's a bad player or anything like that. I actually like DeAndre Hunter a lot. I think I hold on to the hope of 3-and-D wings way too long, longer than what I should. DeAndre Hunter is going to be 27 going into the season. Now, the question is, can he combine all that, put it all together into one, and basically be someone whose skill set ties the entire starting 5 together?